I had a request from, I'm not sure how you call on YouTube, a subscriber on YouTube about making a video talking about long-term relapsers for my stop smoking clinics. And this will be that video, although I'm going to try to make it more comprehensive than just about long-term relapse in my clinics, just general concept about long-term relapse and relapse in general. There's this perception out there that relapse is just a natural part of quitting smoking. And I mean, there's really an influence by lots of experts in this field to basically be telling everybody that you just have to expect that you're going to relapse over and over again before you're actually going to get a quit that works. Like people can't quit on their first time, and it's pretty unlikely you're going to quit in your second or third time. I mean, most of the experts come out and say something. I remember seeing this once on a bus I was driving behind in Chicago. They had this huge sign, and the message that they were delivering, using the tobacco fund money, the big message that they had to get out there is, oh, you got to quit 7 to 8 times, before a quit's going to take. Well, I looked at that message and I thought, how ridiculous. What if you're getting a person who's on their first quit, or their second quit, or their third quit, or their fourth or fifth quit? They're reading like, oh, this quit's not going to take. You got two more good quits in you before this one's going to take. Here we had people who were totally able to stop smoking anywhere along the way, but they were already being told before they started that the quit's going to fail. There is this perception that it's impossible to quit smoking on your first time. There's this perception that you got to quit over and over again. That it's natural to to relapse when you quit smoking. It's not. Is it common? Oh, you bet it is. Does it happen to most people? You bet it does. Does that mean that it's natural and it should happen? No. Do you know why it happens like that? It's because no one is taught how not to relapse. No one is taught why they relapse. They're taught you're going to relapse. You should expect to relapse. There's no big deal because this was predicted for you. People can quit their first time. They can and stay off if they understand what they're dealing with. They're dealing with drug addiction. Drug addiction, simple. And again, we understand this about addiction, that if you get people to understand that if they take the drug again, whatever the drug is they're going back to using, that piece of information can serve to stop people from taking it. Instead, all the literature that's ever been made for all practical purposes is building into, again, somewhere in the body of a brochure, into a book, into whatever self-help has ever been out there. It's don't let a slip put you back to using. Somewhere a line like that is in there, and again, it's giving permission to everybody to slip, making a designation of the term slip. Slip is relapse. If you don't take a puff, you don't slip, you don't relapse, you're never a smoker again. Now, again, the original question was, did I have people who were long-term quitters who relapsed? Oh, you bet. Almost every clinic I did, I probably had people who were off for at least a year. You're going to have a whole bunch of them who had been back to smoking again. I had people who were off, I would say, in most clinics, 5-year plus. And maybe every second or third clinic, I had 10-year plus ex-smokers. I've had 20-year plus ex-smokers, and the record that I can remember is a guy who was off for once 35 years. Now, he was interesting because when he came into the clinic, I believe he was in his mid-50s, early 60s. I'm not really good at guessing ages, and I didn't ask him his age. But I remember when he was going around introducing, I saw he was, he was older. I saw he was at least in his 50s, if not in 60s. And he had said that he took up smoking, it was just a matter of, I think it was like 3 or 4 years earlier, and now he's trying to get off. And I said, oh, you never smoked before? And he said, no, he was never a smoker. He took it up 3 or 4 years earlier. And I was pretty surprised by that. There aren't many people who take it up in their 50s and 60s. Does it happen? Yeah, it does. I've had a few, but very few. And I'm always surprised when it occurs. And I asked him if there was any, major trauma or anything that went on in his life at that point. No, he took up smoking at this, latter stage in his life. And that's what he said, and that's what he believed was the truth at this point in time. It wasn't until a few days later when the topic came up again and we were talking, and And again, it was just so surprising to me because I believe he was in the medical field. I do believe that was the case. And I'm trying to remember the exact detail of what occurred here that made me trigger the re-questioning of him again. I said, I just remember it was like a few days later. I said, "You mean you just never took up smoking? You never had a cigarette prior to that in your life?" And he had to sit back and think. He said, "Well, yeah, well, I actually smoked in college." Now, it was funny because it was so long ago for him. He kind of wrote it off and didn't think about it. And he didn't think that it really meant anything because it was, 30 some years earlier. So it shouldn't have any bearing on what happened, 3 years ago or what's happening now. But it did have bearing. The guy was addicted when he was in college. Yes, he broke free. He broke free successfully. He broke free for 35 years. But he didn't understand that he still had the addiction. It was there. It was dormant. And when he took that first one, he didn't go back to, oh, that's what it was. I remember. I've had people who took up smoking in latter ages, okay? But they usually took it up gradually. It was a few a day, and then one every few days, and then a few a day, and then 5, 10, 20. Working their way up the way most smokers work their way up. Maybe when they're kids or when they're younger, when they're taking their first cigarette. When he introduced himself that first day, I remember him saying it now. He took it up when he was in his he didn't say his age, but I'm just looking at him. He took it up when he was in his mid-50s or 60s, and he went right away. He was smoking regularly, and that's the part that kind of caught me off guard. And then when I asked him at that first session, and I said, "You never smoked before?" And he said, "No, I was never a smoker really." And I just, I don't know if he even said the word "really," but the way he said it, I just interpreted it to mean that, well, he's an exception here. This is the way he took it up. It's bizarre, but it happened. But when it was pressed on another day, that's when it came out. The guy had a smoking history. It was a short-term history. He said it was, short-term while he was in college, but it was long enough where, again, he had his dependency for him. And when he took it up, he went back, again, as if he had never stopped smoking, which is really what happens. Again, he's the exceptional case, long time period. But there were so many times I had people who were off, again, decades. And one of my favorites, it was a guy who was off, he was off 18 years, and he became this radical anti-smoker to a level where this was before they had non-smoking areas in offices or non-smoking workplaces altogether. This was before this time frame. He was high enough in the company that he worked for, and he just hated smoking, that he got it banned on his whole floor. It was it was probably about a 20-story building. They had a whole floor, that he was in charge of. He got it banned because he was such a radical anti-smoker. And it had been that ban had been in effect for 3 or 4 years when he relapsed. Now, you got to understand the bind this guy is in. He has now created this rule that you can't smoke, and it was centered around him. And he relapsed back to smoking and could not get off. And he was stuck because he couldn't smoke by his own rule in there. And this is still when everybody else was able to smoke in other parts of the building. And if I remember right, he actually did try to get it rescinded, but then he realized it was wrong. What he did was the first time of having this thing put in place was right. So he had to live by the same, law that he had set up. It showed you how much this guy didn't want to be a smoker, though, in the sense that, the fact how much he had a disdain for smoking, and still how he lost that quit. And that's important for people to realize because, I get nervous when people hear someone who's going back to after 10 years thinking like, oh my gosh, for 10 years, this person must have really wanted to smoke. This person must have really just loved smoking in the background and just couldn't do it and was so unhappy. No, that's not who these people are. These are people who get to a point that, again, they are totally disgusted by the smell of smoke. Not tempted, disgusted. They look at people smoke and think, what's wrong with you? Are you crazy? You know what this stuff is doing to you? They have all the understanding, all the information to, again, have a total disdain for this product. But they still have an addiction. Yes, it's an asymptomatic addiction. There's no sign to it. And the only thing that, again, makes it totally obvious to a person that they had this past addiction is when, out of curiosity one day, or just, again, for whatever reason, they take a puff on a cigarette, and all of a sudden, everything's out the window. They're smokers again. And it's interesting because a lot of the times these people will say, if when I would do follow-up and I'd get somebody shortly after they relapsed, it was common that you would hear them say, oh, I can't believe I did it. I felt so good before. I feel so terrible now. It's disgusting. I hate the smell. Can you believe what I'm spending on this now? Because, when they quit the first time, it was, like half the price of what they're spending now. And when they quit the first time, they quit because of how expensive it was. And now it's double the price. They say all the right stuff. I hate it. I smell terrible. I'm embarrassed. No one knows I'm doing it. I'm a closet smoker. This is horrid. This is disgusting. This is terrible. I gotta quit someday. And that's what you would hear. It's not like, I gotta quit right now. Hey, they got Joel on the phone. Let's see if I can get him to talk me out of smoking. That's not where the conversation often is. It's like, I gotta quit someday. And you can just see it. You can hear it. The sadness of these people, of what happened and where they are now. And yet the addiction's got them. They're not ready to quit at this point in time. They're not ready to put in what needs to be put in. Let's understand, they're fully capable of quitting. They did it before. They did it before for decades. They know they can quit smoking. But the addiction has now taken them down, and they're afraid of starting this process again. So are there people who can go back after years and decades? Oh, you bet there are. And the fact is, it's any smoker out there. It's anyone you've ever known who is a smoker. It's you. If you were a smoker at one time, and yes, you're off a long time now, but you can't get complacent with this. And complacency is a real issue. The longer you go without smoking, it's very easy to think, yes, you hate smoking, it's disgusting, you know all the dangers about it, but it's very easy to think like, but you're off long enough now where you can control it. No, it doesn't work that way. It controlled you before. It will control you again, given the opportunity. Don't give it that opportunity. All you have to do to keep this quit going, whether this is your first quit, whether it's your 7th quit, like they say the average has to be, whether it's your 100th quit, there is one thing that will make this quit work. Again, no matter what number it is. And that is understanding you're a drug addict, you're addicted to nicotine, and as long as you don't administer nicotine again, you will never be caught in the active addiction. You'll have this past addiction that, again, is asymptomatic, will have no real bearing on your life. The only bearing that it will have is you give it the opportunity to get into your system. And as long as that doesn't happen, you will be fine. Again, translating it down to my simple catchphrase, if you don't want to be an active user again, it's a matter of sticking to the personal commitment you made the day you quit to never take another puff